This is Newsmax TV. I'm Ashley Martella. Well, the voters of Great Britain has spoken, and here to sort things out for us right now is British journalist, broadcaster, and writer Anthony Howard. Thanks for joining us at Newsmax, Anthony.
Thank you for having me.
The British economy is in the worst state it's been in for many years. Predictions were Conservatives would sweep into power. That didn't happen. What went wrong for them, do you think?
I think what went wrong was that their campaign was not a very exciting one. It didn't actually seize the imagination of the British public. When Tony Blair became Prime Minister in 1997, there was a great air of anticipation. Everyone was looking forward to things being different. I don't think Mr. Cameron ever managed to touch that kind of nerve with the public.
There's some talk that Cameron is not a Margaret Thatcher Conservative and appeared to be more Labour light. Is that true?
Yes, I think he certainly has tried to moderate the Conservatives. They used to be called the nasty party. I think he was always very conscious of that. And so he tried to soften the edges. And he had a great success in some ways. That, he had a poll lead, a shockingly great lead in the opinion polls for about 3 years. And it didn't live up, election day didn't live up to where he'd been for a very long time.
Labour lost 87 seats. Is that attributable to the policies of Gordon Brown?
Well, I suppose one has to say it's attributable to the policies of the government and indeed of the Blair government before Gordon Brown, because Gordon Brown's only been Prime Minister, not even for 3 years, so you can't blame him for everything. But he wasn't a very inspirational campaigner, except perhaps in the last few days when he suddenly seemed to find his voice. But he isn't a Tony Blair. And I think that he suffered from that. But the Labour government had been very unpopular for all sorts of reasons, not least the Iraq War, Afghanistan, things like that.
All right, so as for now, Gordon Brown is still Prime Minister, is that correct?
As of now, he is still Prime Minister, and only he can take the decision to go. That he will, I think seriously about the damage that could be done to the British economy if he stays in office. And it may be that in a day or two, and perhaps even less than that, perhaps even today, I don't think it's going to happen today, he will make his way to Buckingham Palace and he will say to the Queen, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, I can't command any longer the confidence of the House of Commons."
Is there a possibility, seeing as House Conservatives made gains in the House of Commons, that they could actually call for a vote of no confidence against Prime Minister Brown?
They wouldn't call for a vote of confidence or no confidence in him. What would happen if he decided to stay in office was that he would present on, I think, May the 25th, what we call the Queen's Speech, which is the programme of legislation for his new government. And there'd be a vote at the end of that debate, and he would lose it. And at that moment, because it would be a confidence debate, he would have to resign. And on the whole, Prime Ministers prefer to jump before they are pushed.
Will Cameron be able to advance any Conservative policies through Parliament, seeing now as he does not have a majority? Or will he have to make compromises with Labour, for example?
I don't think he'd like making compromises with Labour at all, but I think there will be a kind of general feeling that we're in a great economic mess and that therefore some remedial action has to be taken. And he can probably do a deal, not necessarily form a coalition, but do a deal with the Liberal Democrats saying, look, this is what's going to be in my Queen's Speech. Don't vote against it because we'll be in a terrible pickle if you do. And he will, on a piece-by-piece basis, probably be able to survive for a number of months. I don't think he can survive for 5 years for one moment.
All right, what about the far-left Liberal Democrats? Will they have any new clout in the government, and specifically, what are they looking for?
Well, the Liberal Democrats are basically looking for electoral reform. They've always wanted to move away from the system we have, which is, first past the post. If you come top of the poll, you collect the prize. And they've always thought that was unfair to them. And the one thing the Labour government can offer them is, a referendum, i.e. a vote on the specific issue of shall we change the voting system. And that for them will be tempting, but I don't think it will be enough to corral them into a government headed by Gordon Brown.
Now, we understand that a hung parliament is very unusual. Is that correct?
Yes. The last one we had was in 1974. That's almost 40 years ago.
Okay, explain for somebody who doesn't know. Please explain what a hung parliament is.
A hung parliament is a parliament in which no single party has an overall majority. You obviously have one party larger than the other two. Now it's the Conservatives, but the Conservatives do not have 51% of the vote in Parliament. And that means that you have a bit of uncertainty because you don't know whether the government's going to get its programme through. And therefore, it's not very good and not very attractive. And one of the reasons why people like our normal voting system which is not at all on proportional representation, or doesn't pay any attention to that, is that on the whole, it tends to bring out a definite, incisive, decisive result. And on this occasion, that system let us down, and it didn't do it.
If there's another election down the road, what do you expect will happen?
Well, I think the chances of there being an election, not necessarily even next year, possibly even this year, are pretty large because, it's not, you can't govern effectively if you don't have a majority party. And so my guess is that all the parties now in the back of their minds, they are jockeying for what they will look like in the next election. And one reason perhaps why Mr. Clegg, who leads the Liberal Democrats, isn't too keen on joining Gordon Brown and the Labour Party is that he thinks if he does that, he will get massacred in the next election. He'll be joining an unpopular ship and he'll go down with that ship. And that's why I think at the end of the day, he probably won't form any coalition with the present Labour government. If he wants to work with Mr. Cameron, it doesn't have the same liability. But it would cause great ructions in his own party, because his own party tends to be more sympathetic to Labour than it is to the Conservative Party.
Hundreds of voters were shut out at the polls. To what do you attribute the very large turnout?
Well, I think it was very unfortunate. I think the Electoral Commission, which is a new kind of body we have, which is in this country meant to supervise elections, is not very good at its job. We didn't have a vast, great number of new people coming out to vote. The turnout figure was 65%, whereas the last election I think it was 61%. So it's no good the Electoral Commission saying the numbers were unprecedented. They weren't anything of the sort. We used to have much bigger percentage polls than that. No, I think it was a very bad advertisement for British democracy, and that silly body, the Electoral Commission, instead of being flexible and saying, OK, we'll keep the polls open for another quarter of an hour, what damage would that have done? It wouldn't have done any damage to anyone, said inflexibly, no, the doors have to shut at 10 p.m. So they brought the troubles on their own head.
Okay, and finally, Anthony, what do the results of the election mean for the British-American relationship?
Well, I don't think it's very healthy because no one likes dealing with a weak government. And I think the view will be taken, and no doubt already has been taken in the US Embassy in London, that it won't be worth doing many agreements or stitching things up too much with either Mr. Cameron or Mr. Brown because they're not strong enough. They're not strong enough to enforce their will. And I think it will be a grave disadvantage to the whole Anglo-American dialogue, and that will maintain the case for as long as we have a weak government.
British journalist Anthony Howard, thanks so much for speaking with us here at Newsmax. And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.